The conference room fell silent as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell walked through the door. Every head turned and she could feel the weight of their stares. The 12 men seated around the table had that look on their faces, the one she had seen countless times before. Doubt mixed with curiosity, skepticism, wrapped in barely concealed surprise. Sarah was used to it by now. At 5'4", with a slender frame and soft features, she didn't look like what most people imagined when they thought of a Navy SEAL. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform was crisp and professional. But none of that seemed to matter to the men watching her take her seat at the head of the table. Colonel James Harrison cleared his throat and gestured toward her. "Gentlemen, this is Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. She'll be leading the operation in Kandahar." The room erupted in whispers. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but she caught the eye rolls and head shakes. One man, a broad-shouldered Marine captain named Derek Stone, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed over his chest. "With all due respect." "Sir," Stone said, his voice dripping with condescension, "this mission requires someone with extensive combat experience. We're talking about extracting a high value. It's a target from a heavily fortified compound in one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell has more combat experience than anyone in this room. She's completed 47 missions in hostile territory with a 100% success rate. Stone's eyebrow raised. 47 missions? He looked Sarah up and down. Doing what exactly? Communications. Medical support? Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. Direct action raids, hostage rescue, and high-value target elimination. She met Stone's gaze without blinking. "The last mission I led resulted in the capture of 3 Taliban commanders and the recovery of intelligence that prevented 2 major attacks on coalition forces." The room went quiet again. Stone opened his mouth to respond, but Harrison cut him off. "That's enough, Captain." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell earned her position through years of training and proven results in the field. If you have concerns about the mission parameters, address them professionally. Otherwise, keep your opinions to yourself. Sarah appreciated Harrison's support, but she knew this was far from over. As the briefing continued, she outlined the mission details. The target was Abdul Nazir, a Taliban warlord responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. Intelligence indicated he was hiding in a compound just outside Kandahar, surrounded by at least 30 armed militants. "The compound has 3 entry points," Sarah explained, pointing to the map displayed on the screen behind her. "Our intel suggests Nazir moves between the main house and the guest quarters every evening around 2200 hours. That's our window." A Navy lieutenant named Marcus Webb raised his hand. Unlike Stone, his expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "What about air support?" "We'll have 2 Apache helicopters on standby, but the compound is in a civilian area. We need to minimize collateral damage, which means boots on the ground are our primary option." For the next hour, Sarah walked them through every detail of the operation. She had spent weeks studying satellite imagery, reviewing intelligence reports, and consulting with local informants. She knew the compound's layout better than the back of her hand. She knew the guards' rotation schedules, the type of weapons they carried, and even which dogs they kept for security. Despite her thorough preparation, she could feel the resistance in the room. Stone continued to challenge nearly every decision she made. When she proposed entering through the eastern gate, he insisted the western approach was better. When she outlined the extraction plan, he questioned her timing. It was exhausting, but Sarah remained patient and professional, addressing each concern with facts and logic. After the briefing ended, most of the team filed out of the room. Stone lingered near the door, talking in hushed tones with 2 other Marines. Sarah gathered her notes, tending not to notice their glances in her direction. Harrison approached her as she was packing up her laptop. "You've handled that well. They don't trust me," Sarah said quietly. "They will." Harrison's expression softened. "I've been in the military for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone as sharp as you. But you're fighting an uphill battle. Some of these men have never served under a female commander, let alone a female SEAL. Give them time to see what you can do." Sarah nodded, but she knew time was a luxury they didn't have. The mission was scheduled for 48 hours from now. She had 2 days to earn the respect of a team that had already decided she wasn't qualified to lead them. That evening, Zara went to the base gym to clear her head. She found solace in physical training, the one place where her body's capabilities could speak louder than her appearance. She was halfway through a set of pull-ups when Stone walked in with 2 of his Marine buddies. They set up at the weight bench across from her, and Sarah tried to ignore their presence. But as she moved to the punching bag, she heard Stone's voice carry across the gym. "I give it 2 days before she gets someone killed," he said with a laugh. She probably got through SEAL training because they needed to meet some diversity quota. His friends chuckled, and Sarah's hands tightened into fists. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to turn around and confront him, but she forced herself to stay focused on the bag. Let them talk, she told herself. Words don't matter. Results do. She spent the next hour pushing herself harder than usual, her frustration fueling every punch and kick. By the time she left the gym, her knuckles were raw and her shirt was soaked with sweat. But her mind was clear. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the training facility before dawn. The team would be running combat drills to prepare for the mission, and she wanted to be ready. As the others trickled in, she noticed the way they grouped together, talking among themselves and excluding her from their conversations. Webb was the only one who approached her. "Morning, Commander." "Morning, Lieutenant." "Ready for drills?" He nodded, then hesitated. "Look, I just want you to know that not everyone on the team feels the way Stone does. Some of us are willing to give you a fair shot." Sarah appreciated the gesture, but she knew actions would speak louder than words. "I'm not asking for a fair shot," she said. "I'm asking everyone to do their job. If we work together and follow the plan, we'll bring Nazir in and get everyone home safely." The drills began, and Sarah led from the front. They ran through breach scenarios, practiced room clearing, and rehearsed the extraction plan until every movement was second nature. She moved with precision and speed, her small frame allowing her to navigate tight spaces that the larger men struggled with. During one drill, they simulated entering the compound through the eastern gate. Sarah was first through the door, her weapon raised and her movements fluid. She cleared the first room in seconds, calling out positions and directing her team with confidence. By the time they finished the drill, even Stone had to admit she knew what she was doing, but respect and trust were different things. As the day wore on, Sarah could still feel the distance between her and the team. They followed her orders, but there was no camaraderie, no sense of unity. They were going through the motions, waiting for her to prove herself or fail trying. That night, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, reviewing the mission plan for the 100th time. Every detail had to be perfect. There was no room for error, no margin for mistakes. She knew that if anything went wrong, it wouldn't just be seen as a tactical failure. It would be seen as proof that women didn't belong in combat roles, that she didn't belong in the SEALs. The pressure was suffocating, but Sarah had carried it before. She thought back to her years of training, the endless hours of physical and mental punishment that had forged her into the warrior she was today. She remembered the instructors who told her she'd never make it, the fellow candidates who doubted her, and the satisfaction of proving them all wrong. Tomorrow would be no different. She would lead her team into danger, complete the mission, and bring everyone home. And maybe, just maybe, she'd earn the respect she had fought so hard to deserve. The helicopter blades cut through the night air with a rhythmic thump that Sarah felt in her chest. She sat between Webb and a young Army Ranger named Jason Cruz, her face painted with camouflage and her gear strapped tight to her body. Across from her, Stone stared out into the darkness, his expression unreadable. They were 30 minutes from the drop zone. Sarah ran through the mission plan in her mind one more time, visualizing every step. The team would fast rope down 3 blocks from the compound, approach on foot through the alleyways, and breach the eastern gate at exactly 2200 hours. Intelligence confirmed that Nazir would be moving between buildings at that time, making him vulnerable. Harrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Alpha Team, you're 10 minutes out. Weather is clear, no sign of enemy activity in the area. You're green across the board. Copy that, Sarah replied. She looked around at her team, making eye contact with each man. Remember, we move fast and quiet. Stay on comms, watch your angles, and trust your training. We get in, grab Nazir, and get out. No heroes, no improvising. Clear. A chorus of "Yes, Commander" echoed back at her. Even Stone nodded his acknowledgement. The helicopter began its descent, and Sarah felt her body shift into mission mode. All the doubt, all the pressure, all the noise faded away. This was what she had trained for. This was where she belonged. The pilot's voice came through. 30 seconds to drop. Sarah stood, checking her rifle one last time. The side door slid open, and hot desert air rushed into the cabin. Below, she could see the dark streets of Kandahar, illuminated only by scattered lights from homes and shops. Go, go, go. She grabbed the rope and dropped into the night. The descent took only seconds, and her boots hit the ground with practiced ease. The rest of the team followed, forming up around her in a defensive perimeter. The helicopter banked away, its noise fading into the distance. Sarah pulled out her tablet, checking their position against the GPS coordinates. They were right on target. Move out, she whispered into her mic. They moved through the streets like shadows, their footsteps silent on the dusty ground. Sarah took point, her weapon up and her eyes scanning every window, every doorway, every potential threat. Behind her, the team moved in perfect formation. Covering their sectors with professional discipline, they reached the compound faster than expected. Sarah held up a fist, and everyone froze. She could see the eastern gate ahead exactly as it had appeared in the satellite images. 2 guards stood outside, smoking cigarettes and talking in low voices. Their weapons hung casually over their shoulders. Sarah signaled to Webb and Stone. They would take out the guards silently while she and Cruz moved to the gate. The plan was simple, but it required perfect timing. Webb and Stone moved forward, staying low and using the shadows for cover. Sarah watched through her night vision scope as they approached the guards from behind. In one smooth motion, Webb grabbed the first guard while Stone took the second. Both men went down without a sound. Sarah and Cruz rushed forward, reaching the gate in seconds. Cruz pulled out a small explosive charge, placing it carefully on the lock. 30 seconds, he whispered. The team stacked up on either side of the gate, weapons ready. Sarah's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She counted down in her head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The charge detonated with a muffled pop, and the gates swung open. Sarah was through first, sweeping left while Webb went right. The courtyard was empty, but she could hear voices coming from the main house. Movement in the house, she whispered. Stone, take your team around back. Webb, you're with me on the front door. Cruz, secure the courtyard. They moved quickly, and Sarah reached the front door within seconds. Through the window, she could see at least 6 armed men inside, sitting around a table and drinking tea. None of them had noticed the breach yet. Sarah tried the door handle. Locked. She nodded to Webb, pulled out another charge. This one was bigger, designed to blow the door off its hinges. Webb placed it and stepped back, breaching in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was deafening. The door flew inward, and Sarah rushed through the smoke, her rifle up and her finger on the trigger. The men inside scrambled for their weapons, but Sarah was faster. She fired 3 controlled bursts, dropping 2 of them before they could even stand. Webb was right behind her. Taking out a third man who had grabbed an AK-47, the rest of the team poured in, filling the room with controlled chaos. Within seconds, all 6 men were down. Clear, Sarah called out. Stone, what's your status? We've got 4 hostiles down in the back. No sign of Nazir. Sarah's jaw tightened. He was supposed to be here. Search every room. He's got to be somewhere in this compound. The team split up, moving through the house with practiced efficiency. Sarah cleared the first floor with Webb, checking every closet, every bathroom, every possible hiding spot. Nothing. She moved to the second floor, her weapon raised and her senses on high alert. The first 2 rooms were empty, but as she approached the third, she heard a voice. It was speaking in Pashto, urgent and angry. Sarah signaled to Webb, and they stacked up on either side of the door. She counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. She kicked the door open and rushed inside. The room was dimly lit, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she saw him. Abdul Nazir stood at the far end of the room, holding a young woman in front of him as a human shield. In his other hand, he held a pistol pressed against her temple. "Stop," he shouted in broken English. "You come closer, I kill her." Sarah kept her weapon trained on him, but her mind was racing. This wasn't part of the plan. Intelligence hadn't mentioned any hostages. She needed to think fast. "Let her go, Nazir," Sarah said calmly. "There's no way out of this. You're surrounded." "Let her go, you kill me," he spat back. "I know how Americans work." Behind Sarah, she could hear the rest of the team arriving. Stone's voice came through her earpiece. "Commander, we've got explosives in the back. Looks like he was planning something big. We need to move." Explosives. That changed everything. If they couldn't take Nazir alive, they needed to at least secure whatever he had been planning. Sarah kept her eyes locked on Nazir. "Listen to me carefully. We know about the explosives. We know about your plans. But if you cooperate, if you let that woman go and come with us peacefully, I promise you'll be treated fairly." Nazir laughed bitterly. "Treated fairly? Like the others you've captured? Locked in cages for years?" He pressed the gun harder against the woman's head, and she whimpered in fear. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger. She had a clear shot at his shoulder, but it was risky. If she missed, or if he pulled the trigger in response, the woman would die. But if she waited too long, he might kill her anyway. "Commander, your call," Webb whispered behind her. Time seemed to slow down. Sarah watched Nazir's eyes, looking for any sign of what he would do next. She saw the desperation there, the fear mixed with rage. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were unpredictable. Then she saw it. The slightest shift in his grip, the way his finger tightened on the trigger. He was going to kill the hostage whether they moved or not. Sarah made her decision in a fraction of a second. She squeezed the trigger, her shot precise and controlled. The bullet hit Nazir in the shoulder, exactly where she had aimed. His arm jerked, and the pistol fell from his hand. The woman broke free, running toward Sarah with tears streaming down her face. Webb and Cruz rushed forward, tackling Nazir to the ground and securing his hands with zip ties. He screamed in pain and anger, cursing in Pashto as they hauled him to his feet. Sarah lowered her weapon, her hand shaking slightly from the adrenaline. She had done it. They had captured Nazir alive, saved the hostage, and secured the compound. "Alpha Team, we have the package," she said into her comms, requesting immediate extraction. Harrison's voice came back, filled with relief. "Outstanding work, Commander. Extraction team is inbound. 8 to 5 minutes." The team moved quickly, gathering intelligence from the compound and preparing Nazir for transport. Stone approached Sarah as she was helping the rescued woman down the stairs. "That was a hell of a shot," he said quietly. There was something different in his voice now. Respect, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. Sarah nodded. "Just doing my job, Captain." They made it to the extraction point without incident. The helicopter touched down, and they loaded Nazir and the rescued woman inside. As they lifted off, Sarah looked back at the compound, now swarming with coalition forces who would secure the explosives and gather whatever. Intelligence remained. The flight back to base was quiet. Everyone was exhausted, running on adrenaline, and the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Sarah leaned back against the wall of the helicopter, finally allowing herself to relax. But as they approached the base, she knew the real test was just beginning. She had proven she could lead a successful mission, but one success wasn't enough. Not in this world. Not for someone like her. She would need to prove herself again and again, earning respect one mission at a time. The debriefing room was packed with senior officers when Sarah and her team arrived back at base. General Patricia Reynolds, the commanding officer for special operations in the region, sat at the head of the table with a satisfied expression on her face. Next to her, Colonel Harrison looked equally pleased. "Excellent work, Lieutenant Commander," Reynolds said as Sarah took her seat. "Not only did you capture Nazir alive, but the intelligence we recovered from that compound has already proven invaluable. We've identified 3 other cells operating in the region, and we're moving to shut them down as we speak." Sarah nodded, accepting the praise, but keeping her expression professional. Around the table, she could see her team members exchanging glances. Stone sat across from her, his arms folded but his posture less defensive than before. "The explosives we found," Harrison added, pulling up images on the screen, "were enough to level an entire city block. Analysis suggests Nazir was planning an attack on the coalition." "Headquarters in Kabul? You didn't just capture a high-value target? You likely saved hundreds of lives." The room erupted in applause, and Sarah felt a flush of pride mixed with relief. But as the congratulations continued, she noticed something interesting. Several of the men on her team, including Stone, were watching her with new eyes. The skepticism had been replaced by something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the first stirrings of genuine respect. After the debriefing ended, Webb approached her in the hallway. "Hey, Commander. Some of us are heading to the mess hall. Want to join?" It was a small gesture, but Sarah recognized it for what it was. An olive branch. An invitation to be part of the team rather than just leading it. "Sure," she said with a slight smile. "I could eat." The mess hall was crowded with soldiers unwinding after their shifts. Sarah grabbed a tray and followed Webb to a table where Cruz and 3 other members of her team had already gathered. As she sat down, the conversation flowed naturally. They talked about the mission, analyzing what went right and what could have been better. For the first time, they included her in their banter, asking her opinion and listening when she spoke. Stone arrived a few minutes later, carrying 2 trays. He set one down in front of Sarah. "Figured you might want coffee," he said gruffly. "You look like you could use it." Sarah raised an eyebrow but accepted the gesture. "Thanks, Captain." He sat down across from her, and for a moment there was awkward silence. Finally, Stone cleared his throat. "That shot you made tonight. The one that took down Nazir. I've been in combat for 15 years. I've never seen anyone make that call under that kind of pressure. Most people would have hesitated, tried to negotiate longer. But you saw what needed to be done, and you did it." Sarah met his gaze. "I had a good team backing me up. If you and the others hadn't secured the rest of the compound, I never would have had the chance to take that shot." Stone nodded slowly. "Still, I was wrong about you. I made assumptions based on what I thought a SEAL should look like. That was stupid. You earned your place, and you proved it tonight." It wasn't a full apology, but Sarah could tell it was as close as Stone would come. "I appreciate that, Captain. And for what it's worth, your tactical instincts on the ground were solid. When you called out those explosives in the back, it changed my entire approach to the situation." The tension at the table eased, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They swapped stories from previous deployments, complained about the food, and made plans for the next round of training exercises. Sarah found herself laughing at Cruz's impression of their commanding officer, and even Stone cracked a smile as the evening wore on. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time while serving with a new team. She felt like she belonged, not because they were forced to accept her, but because she had earned her place through action and results. The next few weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Sarah led to more successful missions, both smaller operations, but executed with the same precision and professionalism as the Nazir extraction. With each mission, the team's cohesion grew stronger. They learned to anticipate her commands, trust her judgment, and rely on her expertise. But not everyone was happy with Sarah's success. During a routine intelligence briefing, she learned that a rival SEAL team led by Commander Jack Morrison had been vocal in their criticism of her promotion and her mission record. "Morrison's been telling anyone who'll listen that you got lucky with Nazir," Webb told her privately after the briefing. "He's saying the mission should have been his, and that you only got it because of politics." Sarah felt a familiar frustration bubbling up. Morrison was old-school military, It's a kind of officer who believed women belonged in support roles rather than combat positions. She had heard his opinions before, usually secondhand through the grapevine. "Let him talk," Sarah said, though the words tasted bitter. "Our results speak for themselves." But Morrison's criticism persisted, and it began to affect morale. Some of the newer members of Sarah's team started second-guessing her decisions during training exercises. During one drill, a young corporal named Danny Phillips hesitated when Sarah gave an order to breach a simulated building. "Sir." "Ma'am," Phillips stammered, "are you sure that's the best approach?" "I heard Commander Morrison say that eastern breaches are too risky in urban environments." Sarah kept her voice calm but firm. "Phillips, when you're on my team, you follow my orders without hesitation. Morrison isn't here. I am. Now execute the breach." Phillips complied. But the incident bothered Sarah. Morrison's influence was spreading, poisoning the well of trust she had worked so hard to build. She needed to address it directly. That evening, Sarah requested a meeting with General Reynolds. The general listened as Sarah explained the situation, her expression growing darker with each word. "Morrison's out of line," Reynolds said flatly. "Criticizing another officer's performance is one thing. Undermining their authority is another. I'll have a word with him." But Sarah shook her head. "With respect, General, that'll only make things worse. He'll say you're protecting me because I'm a woman, and it'll reinforce everything he's been saying. I need to handle this myself." Reynolds studied her for a long moment. "What did you have in mind?" "A joint training exercise. My team against his. We run the same scenario, and whoever executes it better wins. No politics, no excuses. Just results." A slow smile spread across Reynolds' face. "I like it. Morrison won't be able to refuse without looking like he's afraid of the competition. I'll set it up." The challenge was issued the next day, and Morrison accepted immediately. The scenario was complex. A hostage rescue in a multi-story building with multiple hostile forces. Both teams would run it separately. Their performance would be judged by a panel of senior officers. Sarah spent every spare moment preparing her team. They ran drills until their movements were second nature, studied the building layout until they could navigate it blindfolded, and rehearsed their communication protocols until they could operate in perfect sync. Stone pulled her aside 3 days before the exercise. "Morrison's team has been training hard too. Word is, he's planning to go in fast and aggressive. Full breach on all entry points simultaneously?" Sarah nodded, her mind already working through the tactical implications. "That's a higher-risk approach. If it works, it'll be impressive. If it doesn't, people could get hurt, even in a training scenario." "So what's our approach?" Sarah smiled. "We do what we do best. Precision, patience, and perfect execution. Let Morrison be flashy. We'll be effective." The day of the exercise arrived, and the entire base seemed to be buzzing with anticipation. Morrison's team went first, and Sarah watched from the observation room as they executed their assault. It was aggressive, just as Stone had predicted. They breached all 4 entry points at once, flooding the building with operators. It was impressive to watch, but Sarah noticed the mistakes. 2 operators nearly collided in a stairwell because they hadn't coordinated their movements properly. Another team missed a hostile in a side room, allowing the simulated enemy to kill 2 of Morrison's men before they took him down. And in the chaos of the simultaneous breach, they took almost 8 minutes to locate and secure the hostages. When it was Sarah's team's turn, they moved with calculated precision. She had them enter through a single point, clearing each room methodically as they advanced. It was slower than Morrison's approach, but infinitely more controlled. Every operator knew their role. Every movement was coordinated, and every potential threat was neutralized before they advanced. They reached the hostages in 6.5 minutes, and they completed the entire operation without a single simulated casualty. As Sarah led her team out of the building, she could see the expressions on the faces of the officers watching. Even Morrison looked grudgingly impressed. The debrief was brief and to the point. General Reynolds stood before both teams and delivered her assessment. Both teams demonstrated exceptional skill and bravery. "Commander Morrison, your aggressive approach showed initiative and boldness. However, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's team displayed superior tactical discipline, better coordination, and achieved the objective faster with 0 casualties. In a real-world scenario, her approach would have been the more successful operation. Morrison's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "Congratulations, Commander Mitchell." Sarah extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Morrison shook it. "Thank you, sir. Your team performed admirably." As they left the briefing room, Webb fell into step beside her. "You know what the best part of that was?" "What's that?" Morrison can't say anything now without looking like a sore loser. You didn't just beat him. You beat him at his own game, in front of everyone who matters. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "The goal wasn't to beat Morrison. It was to prove that my team can execute missions effectively, regardless of who's leading them. If that also happens to shut down some of the criticism, that's just a bonus." That night, as Sarah sat in her quarters reviewing after-action reports, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Stone standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Got a minute, Commander?" "Sure, come in." Stone entered and remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "I wanted to apologize. Not just for doubting you at the beginning, but for not standing up to Morrison when he started spreading his garbage. I let him poison the well because part of me still wasn't completely sure about you. Today, watching you lead that exercise, seeing how you prepared the team and executed the mission, I realized something. You're not just a good SEAL. You're one of the best operators I've ever served with. And I should have had your back from day one." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, but she kept her voice steady. "I appreciate that, Captain. And I understand why you had doubts. This is still a new frontier for all of us. The important thing is that you're here now, and you've proven to be an invaluable member of this team." Stone nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Hey, so what's next for us?" Sarah pulled out a classified folder from her desk. "Next, General Reynolds just gave us another high-priority mission. We ship out in 72 hours. I hope you're ready." Stone grinned. "With you leading always?" The mission briefing came at 0400 hours, and every member of Sarah's team was present and alert despite the early hour. General Reynolds stood at the front of the room with Colonel Harrison, their expressions grave. 3 days ago, a Red Cross convoy was ambushed in the mountains near the Pakistan border. Reynolds began. 8 aid workers were taken hostage by a militant group calling themselves the Khorasan Brigade. They're demanding the release of 50 prisoners in exchange for the hostages. Harrison pulled up satellite images on the screen. The brigade is holding them in a compound carved into the mountainside. It's remote, heavily defended, and accessible only by a narrow mountain pass. Intelligence suggests there are approximately 40 militants in the area, all heavily armed. Sarah studied the images carefully. The compound was built into the rock face itself, with only one visible entrance. The terrain around it was treacherous, offering little cover for an approaching force. It was in many ways a worst-case scenario. "Why us?" Stone asked. "This seems like it would require a much larger force." Reynolds nodded. "A larger force would be detected long before they reach the compound. We need a small, highly skilled team that can infiltrate quietly, extract the hostages, and get out before the militants can organize a response. Your team has proven capable of exactly this kind of operation." Sarah felt the weight of the mission settling on her shoulders. 8 civilian lives depended on what happened in the next 48 hours. "What's our timeline?" "Have given us 5 days before they start executing hostages," Harrison said. "But we can't wait that long. Every hour we delay gives them more time to fortify their position or move the hostages. You launch tomorrow night." The rest of the briefing covered tactical details, weather conditions, and extraction plans. Sarah absorbed every piece of information, her mind already formulating strategies and contingencies. When the briefing ended, she gathered her team. "I want everyone to study those satellite images until you can navigate that compound in your sleep," she told them. "We'll run simulation drills all day today. This is going to be the most difficult operation we've attempted, and I need everyone at their absolute best." For the next 18 hours, the team trained relentlessly. Sarah pushed them hard, running scenario after scenario until their responses became automatic. She knew that in the chaos of combat, Muscle memory and training were often the only things that kept people alive. Webb pulled her aside during a brief break. The approach to that compound is brutal. The mountain pass is barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, and it's exposed for at least half a mile. If they spot us coming, we'll be sitting ducks. Sarah had been thinking about the same problem. What if we don't use the pass? What do you mean? She pulled up the topographical maps on her tablet. Look at the terrain on the western side of the compound. There's a steep cliff face, but it's climbable. If we approach from below instead of from the pass, we might be able to reach the compound without being detected. Webb studied the map, his expression thoughtful. That's a hell of a climb. At least 300 feet of nearly vertical rock, and we'd have to do it at night carrying full gear. Do you think it's possible for this team? Yeah, but it's risky. One mistake and someone falls to their death. Sarah weighed the options. The frontal approach through the pass was almost certainly suicide. The climb was dangerous, but it offered their best chance of maintaining the element of surprise. We're going with the climb. Get everyone fitted for climbing gear and rope. We'll do a practice run this afternoon. The practice climb was brutal. Even on a training wall, ascending 300 feet in full combat gear tested the limits of their endurance. Cruz struggled near the top, his arms shaking from exhaustion, but Stone talked him through it. By the time everyone had completed the climb, Tira felt confident they could execute it in the field. That evening, as the team made final preparations, Sarah found a quiet moment to call her younger sister back home. Emma answered on the second ring, her voice bright with excitement. "Sarah, I didn't expect to hear from you. Is everything okay?" Sarah smiled, finding comfort in her sister's familiar voice. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to hear your voice before I head out on another mission." "A dangerous one?" Sarah hesitated. "They're all dangerous. But I've got a good team with me. We'll be fine." They talked for a few more minutes, carefully avoiding any specifics about Sarah's work. As they said goodbye, Emma's voice grew serious. "Hey, Sarah. I know you can't tell me what you do, but I want you to know how proud I am of you. You're doing something incredible, and I love you. I love you too, Em. Take care of yourself." After ending the call, Sarah sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of her responsibilities wash over her. 8 hostages were counting on her. Her team was counting on her. She couldn't afford to fail. The helicopter ride to the drop zone was tense. They would be inserted 5 miles from the compound, then hike through the mountains to reach the base of the cliff. The climb would take approximately 2 hours, and they needed to reach the top before dawn. They landed without incident, and the team moved out immediately. The terrain was even more treacherous than the maps had suggested. Loose rocks shifted under their boots, and the thin mountain air made every breath a challenge. Sarah set a steady pace, mindful of their need to conserve energy for the climb ahead. They reached the base of the cliff just after midnight. Sarah looked up at the rock face looming above them, barely visible in the darkness. "Webb, you're first up. Establish the anchors and fixed lines. Stone, you're second. The rest of you follow in order. Stay quiet and stay focused." Webb began his ascent, moving with the careful precision of an experienced climber. Sarah watched him disappear into the darkness above, trusting that he would secure their route. One by one, the team members followed, each pulling themselves up the rope with grim determination. Sarah went last, bringing up the rear to ensure no one was left behind. The climb was exhausting, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. Her hands ached from gripping the rope, and her shoulders burned from the strain.
Ow.
But she pushed through the pain, focusing on one handhold at a time. After what felt like hours, she pulled herself over the edge of the cliff. Webb reached down to help her up, and she collapsed onto solid ground, breathing heavily. "Everyone made it," he whispered. "We're about 50 meters from the compound entrance." Sarah forced herself to her feet, her professional focus returning immediately. They had successfully completed the hardest part of the infiltration. Now came the rescue. The team moved silently through the darkness, approaching the compound entrance. 2 guards stood outside, but they were facing the mountain pass, never suspecting that anyone could have approached from behind. Sarah signaled to Stone and Cruz. They moved forward like ghosts, neutralizing the guards in seconds. The team stacked up at the entrance, weapons ready. "Remember? 8 hostages?" Sarah whispered. "We need to locate them fast and get them out before the militants realize we're here. Suppressors on minimal noise? Let's move." They entered the compound, and Sarah immediately noticed how much larger it was than the satellite images had suggested. The structure extended deep into the mountain, with multiple levels carved into the rock. Finding the hostages in this maze would be nearly impossible. Then she heard it. A faint voice, speaking English, coming from somewhere below. "Please, we have families. We're humanitarian workers. We just want to go home." Sarah motioned for the team to follow. They descended a narrow staircase, carved into the stone, moving deeper into the mountain. The voice grew louder, and Sarah could now hear multiple people speaking. They were close. The staircase opened into a large chamber lit by flickering lanterns. Sarah's heart sank as she took in the scene. The 8 hostages were huddled in the center of the room, surrounded by at least 20 armed militants. Getting them out without a firefight would be impossible. She signaled the team to fall back, retreating up the stairs to regroup. "We need a distraction," she whispered. "Something to draw most of those militants away from the hostages." Cruz had an idea. "There's a weapons cache we passed 2 levels up. If we set charges on it, the explosion will bring every militant in the compound running. While they're dealing with that, we grab the hostages and run." It was risky, but Sarah couldn't see another option. "Do it. Set the charges for a 3-minute delay. That should give us enough time to get into position." Cruz disappeared up the stairs while the rest of the team moved back toward the hostage chamber. Sarah positioned them at strategic points, ready to move the moment the explosion happened. The wait was agonizing. Sarah counted down the seconds in her head, her finger resting on the trigger of her weapon. She could see the hostages through a gap in the rocks, their faces drawn and frightened. "Just a little longer," she thought. "We're going to get you out of here." The explosion, when it came, was deafening even from 3 levels away. The militants in the hostage chamber immediately sprang into action, most of them rushing toward the stairs to investigate. Sarah waited until only 4 guards remained with the hostages, then gave the signal. Her team moved with lethal efficiency. The 4 remaining guards went down before they could raise an alarm. Sarah rushed to the hostages, helping them to their feet. "We're American military," she said quickly. "We're here to get you out. Can you walk?" The hostages nodded, too shocked to speak. Sarah could hear shouts and gunfire from above as the militants realized they were under attack. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before this place became a death trap. "Move now," Sarah ordered. Her team formed a protective circle around the hostages, guiding them toward a secondary exit that intelligence had identified. They could hear footsteps pounding down the stairs behind them, the militants realizing what had happened. Bullets ricocheted off the stone walls as they ran. Webb took a hit to his body armor, the impact knocking him down. Stone grabbed him, hauling him back to his feet. They kept moving, the exit growing closer with each desperate step. They burst out of the compound into the pre-dawn darkness. The cliff edge loomed ahead, and Sarah's heart sank. They couldn't descend with the hostages, not under fire and not in the dark. They needed another way out. Then she heard it. The distant thump of helicopter rotors. The extraction team had arrived early, responding to the sounds of combat. 2 Black Hawks appeared over the ridge, their door gunners laying down suppressing fire on the compound entrance. 1 helicopter touched down on a flat area 50 meters away. Sarah herded the hostages toward it, her team providing covering fire. Militants poured out of the compound, firing wildly, but the helicopter's door gunners kept them pinned down. They loaded the hostages onto the first helicopter. Then Sarah and her team piled into the second. As they lifted off, Sarah looked back at the compound, now swarming with militants firing uselessly at the departing aircraft. They had done it. 8 lives saved, 0 casualties on her team. As the adrenaline began to fade, Sarah felt the exhaustion settle into her bones. But she also felt something else. Pride. Not just in herself, but in her team. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Back at base, the rescued hostages were checked by medical personnel while Sarah's team went through debriefing. General Reynolds personally thanked each member of the team, but when she reached Sarah, she pulled her aside. "That was extraordinary work, Commander. I'm recommending you for a commendation. But more importantly, I'm recommending you for a promotion. The Navy needs more officers like you, people who can lead under impossible pressure and bring everyone home alive." Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you, General. But I was just doing my job. My team deserves the real credit," Reynolds smiled. "A good leader always gives credit to their team. But a great leader doesn't realize when they've become irreplaceable. You've earned this, Sarah. Every step of the way." That evening, Sarah sat with her team in the mess hall, sharing a meal and swapping stories from the mission. Stone raised his coffee cup in a toast. To Commander Mitchell, the toughest, smartest, and most capable SEAL I've ever had the privilege of serving with. The team echoed the sentiment, and Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. She had started this journey as an outsider, someone who had to prove herself with every breath. But somewhere along the way, she had become part of something bigger. She had earned not just their respect, but their trust and loyalty. As she looked around the table at the faces of her team, Sarah realized that this was what she had been fighting for all along. Not recognition or promotions or proving people wrong. She had been fighting for the right to serve alongside warriors like these, to lead them into danger and bring them home safely. And now, finally, she had found where she belonged.